Hi, I'm Wilnona Marie, and this is the story behind my stories.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mott,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Wilnona Marie.
Well, happy spring, everybody, and welcome to the Author Stories Podcast. If you go to hankgarner.com, we've got a new site design I think you're going to like. It's easier to dig through all of the archives of the show. And as always, there's a little search box on the right-hand side and a box where you can sort them in a long list, and you can find an author interview that you like. Also, subscribe to the show. There are buttons over there in the right-hand sidebar as well. If you would like to support the show, there is a link in the right-hand sidebar where you can donate to the show. If you'd like to drop something in the Author Stories tip jar, there's also a link in the top sidebar where if you would like to advertise your product or service in the show, you can do that as well. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, please click on the Amazon links in the show notes and support the authors that come on, and we do appreciate it. After our great author interview today, stay tuned at the end of the show for an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. Hey authors, you need an editor in your life, and not just an editor, but an editor that understands you and gets what you're trying to accomplish. That's why you need to visit my good friend Scott Woodley at marlomoss.net and let him take a look at your work. He'll give you a free sample edit. Scott can help you be the best writer you can be. Visit him at marlomoss.net. Inspired sentences and polished paragraphs for print-worthy books at competitive rates and always on time. Offering a full range of editorial and ghostwriting services to self-published and traditionally published authors. Turn your ideas into words and see your dreams become books. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Wilnona Marie on the show with me today. She is one half of Wilnona and Jade, this awesome couple of ladies that are doing some really fantastic stuff on the web and in publishing right now. So welcome to the show, Wilnona.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to have you. We begin each show with the same question, and so we have to start there. What is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
I was 7 years old, and I had decided I wanted to be a neurosurgeon because I had started studying neurology pretty much. I love the brain, and so I started reading about the brain and cerebellum, the cerebrum, and stuff like why they use it and the connections. And we had this thing in our school where we had to write a book. And I was like, well, that sounds sucky, and, you know, it's not about the brain, so I'm not interested. And so I started writing and writing. And I wrote and wrote and wrote, and I ended up with 8 pages in that 1 hour. And I just had so much fun. And my teacher read it, and she wrote, "This is the most inventive thing I have ever read." And I kept turning the pages, so she told my parents later, she was surprised it came from a 7-year-old. But the thing that she really was like, could you please give me some connectivity? So I went through Pinocchio, I went through some biblical stories, I went through some stories I made up, I used some dreams. But after that, I had never been like the best at anything while I was in school. So I was like, that's what I want to do. And then at 10 years old, I got published for the first time ever.
What did you get published at 10 years old?
Highlights. I got published in Highlights magazine. It was a poem about dreams and the possibilities of them coming true.
I loved Highlights magazine when I was in elementary school. They were everywhere, it seems, and now that we don't have small kids anymore, I never see the magazine. We used to see it in doctors' offices and stuff. That was a really great publication that I think hasn't really gotten the props it deserves in recent history.
Exactly. In fact, I didn't even know it was still around.
Yeah, well, and it may not be anymore, but I know when, say, our youngest is 14 now, and I remember, going to the pediatrician when he was little and picking up a highlights magazine there and thinking, oh, I remember this from when I was in school 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. And, it was such a cool thing. So, did a teacher submit for you, or did you submit yourself?
So, I had to submit myself, but what happened was, like brain surgery, like the reason I knew what a neurosurgeon was is because, once I fell into something, I become obsessed. And I need to know everything about it. So I immediately went to go find out about publishing, and it turns out there weren't that many books about publishing. But our librarian was a published author 6 times over. So she started helping me craft query letters. So I started writing query letters when I was about 7.5. It's my first query letter. And then I thought that I should go directly to the Big Five. And I did. I didn't understand about agents or anything. And she was explaining it. I was like, I don't get it. So I just sent it off. And my mom helped me learn how to type. And I pen-pecked at that thing and sent it off. But anyway, eventually she was like, well, you should stop trying to play around with the Big Five and go to like highlights where kids actually get to have published work. And I got something published, so.
That's so awesome. I talk to a lot of people, and there's a common thread that goes through a lot of interviews where there was a teacher or some adult, sometimes it's a parent, but a lot of times it's a teacher, and maybe just because they're more in tune to look for these things, that encouraged a child early on, and it was that one little piece of encouragement was really what that person needed to keep going. So it sounds like you had both. You had a teacher that recognized that early on, and then you also had a parent who continued that encouragement and even helped give you guidance to make that dream a reality. That's a really rare thing that you have.
Yeah, well, my mom died at the beginning of my actual ascent to fame. I guess you call it fame. Other people call it fame. I don't really. It doesn't feel like fame. But yeah, she died 6 months into the ascent to this career. Oh. And she had been behind me for amount of years. Well over a decade. So she's never got to see anything that's come from it. Before she died, we got our first interview on London national television, on England national TV. And so that's all she ever got to see. So it's been kind of hard to do that. And like, yo, you pushed me. You're the one. Let me get off that subject completely. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's, I'm sorry that she didn't get to see it come to full fruition, but, it sounds like that she did see that you were carrying through with it. So that's awesome. So what did, after having that poem published, that obviously was a huge motivator to keep going, I would imagine.
No, I was depressed. Thoroughly and utterly depressed. Because it was not a book with the Big Five. And that's what I wanted. I wanted Random House for my first time out at 10 years old. I knew what I wanted. So I was thoroughly and utterly depressed. I don't even own a copy of the magazine. My mother bought 7 of them. I burned them all. Because it was an idea failure to me. Now I wish I had it.
Right.
Because I didn't get it again for another 7 years.
Right. So what's that next thing? How did you? So you're devastated that it wasn't a Big Five publishing contract. Did you go back to the drawing board and try to think of what the next great literary piece would be?
So the librarian explained to me that you have to keep writing for years, and I thought, I'm little, so all I have to do is do my homework and then write, and then I can get ahead of the adults. So that's all I did. So I was churning out a good 55 stories a year.
Wow.
And not including poems. And then I started getting to song lyrics when I was 10. And so I just kept knocking them out. Because I figured they said that you need to hone your craft. And I wasn't going to pay anyone to hone my craft. So I figured I'd just read and write and read and write, and it would hone my own craft. And that's what I did. And then I found out it wasn't as easy as sending a letter off and getting published.
Right. So what was...
It really started to set in.
Yeah, what kind of things were you writing? Kind of a mixture, some stories, some poetry. Like what was the thing that really grabbed your imagination?
Well, since I found my first success with the poem about dreams, and my first thing that got me started off with me about a dream. I stayed in that dream world for about 5 years. So I would start off with, I had the character would have a dream, and then they wouldn't be able to finish the dream. It would just end abruptly. The dream sequence would end, and they would get up, and then they would go through a normal day of everything, brushing your teeth. Well, I remember reading one time that they said if you start a day at the beginning of the day, then your readers will be bored. So I always started it with the dream and then made the person go through the routine of brushing teeth and getting ready and everything. And then going to school, and then that dream would start to happen. And then they would have to figure out a better way for it to end because they never finished it. So the reader would never know how it would end until they got to the end. And I turned those out over and over and over again for 5 years. And most of my poetry started the same way, but it rhymed.
Nice. What kinds of things did you like to? What are you still there, Wilnona?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Your audio glitched out for a minute. So, what types of things did you like to read early on?
Choose your own adventure books. I don't even know if they still have those.
I love those.
But now the first time anyone's ever asked me about that. So yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking that's probably where I got to start, because it starts off with a story, and then you have to decide how you're going to go through the adventure. It was like a maze and a book, and before that whole touchpad touch thing where you could go through a story and then touch, and then they have the same thing for children today, but it's just imagination and interaction, not just having it there on the screen and watching it play out. It has to play out in your mind, and you got to use deductive reasoning. And I love that. I just love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm with you. I don't know if those things still exist, but as a kid, I remember, you could reread a book and have a different ending. So that, I think it encouraged kids to go back and revisit that same book over and over again.
Exactly. And then you try to choose different things in different spots just to okay, so what if I do that here now? Instead of it's choosing B. Okay, now let me choose C right here and then go back to B.
Right. Exactly. I like to ask people about those early influences and what they like to read, because do you feel like that the things that you do now were influenced, or can you see a thread of that? The things that you loved early on that still are a part of who you are and what you do now?
I think now, yes. If you hadn't asked the question, I wouldn't say that.
Right.
Because I was going to be like, no, I'm going to tell you what really changed it. And for every interview I've done, I've always been like, no, that had nothing to do with it. But now that I'm looking at our new book, and I'm like, yes, it did. Because we don't write straight out novels. We kind of write anthologies, but our anthologies are more about living life in general, just broken high heels or multiple choice quizzes in the form of an essay or poem or something like that. It's never just straight story, and it's never straight poem. We're going to find an inventive way to do it, a recipe. Yeah. Let me back it up. I was pacing while doing this interview, and apparently there's a dead spot. Now I know about that. Go the other way. So I guess the choose your adventure does play a role. Although I have to say the biggest role in my modern writing career from 12 until 15 was Narnia, the Chronicles of Narnia.
Oh yeah.
I'm obsessed with that. Loved it because my teacher, I was always turning in these papers the exact same way. All my essays went the same format, minus, the fiction side of it. But everything that any teacher read for the next year of my elementary school kind of had the same format. And when I got into middle school, I turned in my first paper, and they were like, all right, that's cool. You're very inventive. And by the time I got to 7th grade, they were like, hey, I had the same English teacher, and she was like, you might want to try something different. And so we read Chronicles of Narnia, and I was like, all right, he actually does a good job. Let's go with that then. It'll work. And then when I turned 15, I read the book that changed my life and the book that changed Jade's life because she did not read. She was 4 years behind me, so she was 11 at the time, and she probably should have had nothing to do with this book, but she didn't really read. And then we both picked up, first she picked up Mickey Spillane, the Black Athlete. Yes, we picked up Mickey Spillane, yeah.
Yes.
The Black Alley. She read the book, she fell in love, and she's never stopped reading. She reads, now Jade reads about 10 books a year just because of that book. She would have never started reading if it wasn't because of that book. For me, I read the book, and I changed genres from fantasy and sci-fi to noir crime novels, family crime sagas. And I wrote 36 books with those. I would churn out 4 to 5 a year complete novels, and then 7 novellas.
What did you do with all those books?
Right? Now I have a new dead spot. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Again?
Yeah, I said, what did you do with all those books that you wrote?
My mother tried to save them furiously, and of course I went for my goal of the big 5. So for every book I wrote, there was 6 or 7 different types of queries, and they went out to the big 5, and then the answer was no, and so I threw that one away and started over and wrote a new one, and I just kept going. So all this whole time I have been trying to pitch the big 5 since I've been 10. And no, the big 5 has never said yes to any of my queries.
Have you self-published any?
I have. I started my own publishing press before there was the Amazon thing.
Right.
I started that at 20. And I picked up new people, and I had about 7 authors under my own publishing house. Like, when I'm saying publishing, that meant that I learned how to set my own printing. I bought an Office Depot size printer, printed them out, cut them according to the size, did my own graphics, found the papers, put on the covers, did the graphic designs for that. And then I would go and get the glue from the, it was a Marina store that had the special kind of glue that does perfect binding best. And I went and I got that glue, and I would center it, and then I would put it in a vise, and I would hold it, and I would make those books one by one.
Wilnona, you are my hero. I love that so much. I'm a big fan of authors that have that DIY spirit, that do-it-yourself thing, and folks that bootstrap their own author publishing business. But you take that to an insane level, and I absolutely love that. You are an author stories rock star.
I still feel like an underachiever. Random House, if you're out there, I will finally have achieved everything if I just get you to sign a deal.
Well, let me tell you something. I talk to a lot of authors and a lot that are traditionally published and a lot that are indie published. And a lot of those traditional guys are looking over the fence, and they're thinking that the indie grass is pretty green right now.
It is awesome.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be mad because I have signed a 3-book contract deal with a New York publisher.
Nice. And
yeah, it was not fun. I was so happy to get back to indie. I wrote those 3 books in 6 months just to get out of it.
Oh gosh, man. You mentioned Jade a minute ago, and Jade was supposed to be with us today because you two are the dynamic duo of Wilnona and Jade, and you guys are all over the internet doing really cool stuff. But Jade couldn't be with us today because she's in a production meeting, I think. Discussing some new cool stuff that you guys are doing. Who is Jade, and how did the two of you partner up to do the stuff that you're doing?
Well, my mother knew her mother, so I knew Jade 9 months before she appeared on Earth. So yeah, that's how we partnered up. So I always wanted a sister, and when I found out that her mother was having a baby, I was like, okay, that's my sister.
I have some friends. Yeah, I have some friends like that we grew up in church together, and they're like the siblings that, because we were together every time the doors were open, and it seems like we were, those church pew siblings.
Exactly. And what's funny, really sad right now is that Jade found I have my own home, and then it was cute because I always wanted a cosmopolitan kind of condo. It was really metro, and it has the tennis courts and the walking path and the dorm. It has all that cool stuff. I always wanted that. And then Jade says, "Oh, I'm buying a house next to the water." And I went, oh, really? I'm putting money on that. And now we live together.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny.
I mean, I still have the condo. I just like visit it once a year. Like, yeah, that was cool. I'm out. I'm going back to the water.
Oh, that's so funny. So tell me about the stuff that you guys are doing together. And you guys, you mentioned the anthologies a little bit ago, but like you said, these are not traditional anthologies. These seem to have a kind of a narrative thread of their own, more than just a collection of similarly themed stories and poetry and things like that. It's almost like they all work together to be something new and different. Where'd the idea for these come from, and what are you guys hoping to do with these books?
So the idea of the anthology is Jade. If we ever break up, I will say I never said that. Because I want to keep my money. Yeah. But the idea of the anthologies was Jade's. I took a 3-year sabbatical from writing officially, like professionally. I wrote for myself just to let off steam. I had gone through a really bad divorce and had a really horrific marriage. And I just needed to let off some steam, so I write a few things, and that was it. And then Jade was like, why don't you write a book? And I said, no. Not everyone's been saying that for 3 years, write a book. No, not going to do it. And then Jade goes, for me. And I mean, you've known someone 9 months before they appeared on this earth. You do that for them. So I did that. And she was like, okay, a book of poetry. And I was like, oh my God, poetry doesn't sell, right? And she was like, no, it's for me. So I get to pick. And I was like, all right, a book of poetry. So I knocked out 64 in 7 days. I was like, done. Book of poetry. Yeah, I write poems stupid fast. So 64, 7 days, and I was like, all right, that's 64 pages. Book is done. Boom, I'm going to hit publish. And then one of our friends, Jade and I's friend, was going through a really hard time, and she decided to finally take the big step and go see a therapist. And we were all, let's support you, keep going. We drove her, and we made sure she was happy afterwards, and she wasn't going to give up because she really needed to see a therapist. And then one of her things the therapist said was write. And she was like, I've always been afraid of writing, but she wrote. And when I read her stuff, it touched my heart. And I was like, you deserve to be published. And she was like, oh, when I'm like 65, I'll publish. No, you deserve to be published now. And I knew I still had the publishing house. I hadn't used it in years. So I fired up the presses and started over. And that was the reason why I got started. And not only did I would just write poetry because I wrote those 64. They were crappy. They weren't the best things. I did it for Jade because she asked me to. When I read her stuff, when my friend who went to the therapist, I was like, she deserves to have a good book all the way through. So I went back and I rewrote. JD wrote with me for the first time ever in life. She was like, I will write because I was like, if you ask me to do this favor, you better write with me. So we had to. As she said, I was kicking and screaming the whole way. So yeah, that's what happened. And then we ran into an old friend of ours from New York. She had moved to New York, and her mother had gotten sick unexpectedly, and she had to come home. And it turns out that for the first time ever in her life, she had decided to write. And when she started writing, it was decent. It wasn't literary things. It wasn't it was life. She wrote about just life, straight up and down life and feelings and getting yourself back together and that sort of stuff. So that kind of turned out to be And I Thought Divorce Was Bad, which is ladies from 25 to 54 writing together about life, love, relationships, death, and anything else that happens. And Jade decided to put in life lessons. There should be 10 life lessons that take you through the book. So a quote that says something about a life lesson, like losing footing is not falling. And in the whole section, we talk about stumbling down, but not exactly falling, not exactly hitting the ground. It's like you stumble, but you catch yourself and you get back up and you're like, what am I supposed to do with life now? That sort of. And that's how those anthologies got started. And the second one was a recipe that my late mother gave me for biscuits. She wasn't late at that time. She wasn't dead yet. So that was the only book she's ever read. And I've been writing since I was 7. And it's been a few years, and she picked it up and she read the whole thing, and then she was like, I love this book. And I was like, Ma, you never read any of my books. She's like, but I love this one. This is the best. And I was like, you never read anything else. She's like, I tell you this one's the best. I'm like, okay. And she's like, you need to make one change. And I'm like, all right. You know, if you read the book, what's the change? She's like, in my recipe, I said you need a whole stick of butter for these biscuits, not a half stick. Don't have people out here making half butter biscuits and being like, oh my word, they fell apart. They taste horrible. That's not going on my name.
Everybody knows they're not going to be flaky if you don't put the whole stick.
I know. One of the stories in that book was like called Shoestring Budgets. That book was literally from people for 18 to 26. You know, like from 18 to when you seriously decide to think about start dating for real, like not just for fun, but, you know, maybe look for someone to settle down and have a relationship with over the next 3 to 5 years, something like that. So from coming out of high school till settling down for your first real relationship,
right.
That's what that book is for. And I assume that those people don't have a ton of money to be wasting on butter, because butter is expensive.
Yes, real butter is, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So the And I Thought series really kind of became a whole thing, didn't it? Not only the anthologies, but it's kind of been a branding thing for you and Jade that then turned into some video work that you guys are doing. Tell me what kind of how this springboarded to all these other opportunities.
What happened was we were going on our first tour. And go figure, our first publicity tour was in LA. And one of the authors from the lovely story that I gave you about how we got the first book just up and decided that they no longer wanted to be a part of the group. And unless we changed from being like books to like something bigger. And so we did. We did it in 24 hours. Changed it around. We made a whole brand. And then she left a week later. But that wasn't the point.
She had a good idea.
Yeah, she did. So now we have this brand, and we were like, we can't just be the And I Thought series. We became the And I Thought Ladies. And the And I Thought Ladies, since they were a brand, we had a podcast already. And we figured, well, if we have a podcast, we might as well have a radio show and then a YouTube show. And then the YouTube show became, I've always wanted to have my own TV show. And we picked up a manager along the way from California. We have 4 of them now. But we picked up one, and she was in California. And I was like, I want a TV show. That's what I want in my ultimate goal. Make it happen. And I thought it'd be 3 years from now. You know, she'd call me one day and be like, we've got someone to pick you up. And she was like, no, I called some people this was 2:00 in the afternoon. I called her at 9 a.m. PST time, 2 p.m. PST time, which would be 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. She calls me back and she says, I've got it. I said, you got what? I've got the show. You've got Channel 18 and 3 cities in California. They're going to need your show, your first episode, and by the end of the month to get the summer, to fit on the summer schedule. And you're going to need 3 episodes to keep your time slot. So in 30 days, we shot 3 episodes of a docuseries called Just Right in Life. And the reason we called it Just Right in Life, because the year before at a conference, a friend of ours is an executive producer of a reality TV show. It's not yet done. It's not on television yet, but it's in development. And so she pitched it to a producer, and the producer said no, because writers are boring. And I thought about my life, and I was like, my life isn't boring. I'm on a plane every 2 weeks. Not only on a plane, I'm at parties, I'm at premieres, I'm like at fashion shows. So I'm gonna do this whole show. And that's why I called my manager. And when she told me in less than 24 hours that I had the show, it was a mad dash to the finish. But we now have a show. And we're coming up on season 2. And then later on, we did the steps to end up with our show on Amazon. And I thought Amazon would say no for sure. And they went, yes. And I went, what? And so now it's on Amazon.
I love it. Well, I really love all the stuff that you guys are doing. Wilnona, what do you hope people, when they encounter you and all of the work that you and Jade and the other I Thought ladies are doing, what do you hope that you're able to convey to someone? And what do you hope that they take away from your work?
This brand started as a way to tell women that, yeah, you went to university and yeah, you've gone and got everything that you think you need, but there's so much more like emotionally that we need. And it's a way for someone who's 25 to listen to someone who's 74. Because someone who's 25 is going to pick up the book to listen to someone who's 25. That's just what it's for. And someone who's 74, if they're an author and they tell their friends, they're going to pick up the book to read their sections that the 74-year-old. But in the meantime, if you read it from cover to cover, you're going to get advice from people from 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, 75, and even 85 in between. So we can all learn to talk to each other. We can learn to innovate and open our minds for the older people, even the younger people. And then for the younger people, we can learn to listen to older people and not make the same mistake. And that is my goal. That's all I really want. I want someone not to make the mistake. And that really was what it came from. I had a horrible marriage. And if I could save one person from making that mistake, I would be forever grateful to the universe.
Well, I think that's a great goal, and Wilnona, if folks are just learning about you and encountering the work that you're doing, where can they find you online to find out more about you and what you guys are doing to empower women and just individuals in general? You
can find more about us at andwethought.com. Everything that you want to know is on that page. We have links to the show. We're finalists for Poet of the Year, so you can find out about that as well. And can I do a small plug for ourselves?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. I just want to tell you guys what we have coming up soon. We are starting a literary magazine, which will be out on October the 6th. We already have a magazine for the 25 hottest authors and advocates and stuff like that. That's already out. We will be doing a 3-day experience your life writing workshop, which is different in the sense that you take 3 days and go live in like the city, go experience that city, and then take your novel that you have with us, and you'll have people from that are really good at writing and have bestsellers, and they will help you for 3 hours for 3 days to work through your novel and put the technical bones in it and use some of the experience that you've had in that city and enhance your character. I believe that you should have experience when you write. So that's what we're trying to do. And yes, our first city is going to be in Las Vegas, and it will be in October. And then we have the virtual book festival coming up as well. In August.
I love that. Wilnona, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today. We're going to send everybody to see you and to check out all the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you. You have a lovely day.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
I was walking through the woods between Wolfert's Roost and the future site of my father's Stone Manor house. The house would eventually stand on what had been old Baltus's pumpkin field, the land where I had found my grandfather's head. Father had chosen the spot for its view of the Hudson River. Knoll was to be a grand mansion in the Gothic Revival style, but at the time the mansion was but a few foundations of Van Brunt stone. I had become fond of the place already, the idea of it, and I spent many a night alone in a shack on the property. My mother disapproved. She would have me sleep in the room across from hers in our townhouse. But I was 15 and did not answer to her. I kept a bottle of spirits hidden in the crook of 2 walnut trees near old Baltus's grave. I thought he would approve of the gesture. I had stopped along my way to fetch it out. At the moment the first pull of liquor touched my throat, I heard a ghastly, inhuman laugh. I was not alone in the woods. Had God sent the horseman after me? Had I sinned that terribly? I ran through the wood and found the field where Knoll was to be built. The outline of the foundations was barely discernible beneath the snow. An apparition stood there. Though I have seen him many times since, I shall never forget my first glimpse. Gaunt in moonlight, headless, exuding power and malice. A magic thing in the land of the ordinary. The headless horseman of Sleepy Hollow. What chills those words evoke! It charged at me, hatchet raised. I stood transfixed, unable to move, unable to even imagine escape. This was the servant of God, after all, sent to strike down sinners. I hurled the bottle from my hand, ashamed that I had become a drunkard as Baltus had been. It shattered against the foundations of Knoll. I stretched out my arms and awaited judgment. A piercing white light broke the darkness. The horse reared. "Not my Dylan!" cried Agatha, appearing from the wood. She held a skull in her hand. It shone brightly as a diamond, and in that moment I understood. The horseman did not serve God. He served my grandmother. Perhaps in that moment I came to see Agatha and God as one and the same. The unholy spirit fought her command. A foreleg of the demon horse struck my head with such power that I fell backwards with a cry and knew no more. I carry the scar to this day. A slight indentation in my temple, barely noticeable. In my days of courting I was told that when I am angry the patch of insulted skull bone will stand out in a disturbing manner. I have never had occasion to see this phenomenon, however, as I am generally well pleased whenever I pass a mirror.